Good afternoon, everyone. I am Nandakishore Karpurapu, Urban Transport Planner working with IUT India. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the 16th Urban Mobility India Conference cum Exhibition 2023. This technical session is on gender mainstreaming in urban mobility. The format for the session is as follows. There would be brief remarks by the chairperson, Ms. Ashwini Bhide, IAS Managing Director, Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation Limited, and context setting by Dr. Laghu Parashar, Senior Transport Specialist, World Bank. This would be followed by presentation by our distinct speakers, after which there would be a question and answer session. Now I would like to invite the chairperson, Ms. Ashwini Bhide, IAS, Managing Director, Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation Limited. Mrs. Ashwini Bhide is an IAS officer from the batch of 1995 of Maharashtra cadre, is a postgraduate in English literature from Pune University. She has ranked first among the women candidates in civil service examination in the year 1995. Ms. Ashwini Bhide has helmed some of the most ambitious projects and mega urban infrastructure projects in the city of Mumbai, coastal road projects as AMC of BMC, Mumbai Metro Line 3 as MD of MMRC, Eastern Freeway, the elevated road to International Airport, several flyovers on major arterial roads and all, and rail over bridges including Milan ROB as well, as the first phase of Mumbai monorail in her stint with MMRDA. Now I would like to introduce Mr. Laghu Parashar. Without taking much of your time, I would like to invite the contest setting and moderated by Laghu Parashar, Senior Transport Specialist, World Bank, for the session. Dr. Laghu Parashar is a Senior Transport Specialist at the World Bank. He holds more than 18 years of experience in planning and implementation of sustainable urban mobility solutions. Few of the notable projects that he has worked on include Women Inclusion in Bhubaneswar Electric Autos, drafting urban bus specifications and other model documents considering inclusivity for Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, bus rapid transport systems for Amritsar, Jaipur city, operations on PPP projects in Jaipur, Ludhiana, Amritsar, Jalandhar and Bhubaneswar, from concept till the implementation stage. Now I would request Mr. Laghu Parashar to take over the session.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I will start with my opening remarks. I'm really happy. It gives me an immense pleasure to chair this session on this important topic of gender mainstreaming in urban mobility. And we have a galaxy of panelists here with very diverse backgrounds and rich experience. And I'm expecting a very, very lively session, which will keep you awake, especially after the lunch which we had just now. So India has already seen a huge development, huge kind of rapid progress of urban transit systems across all cities of the country. And we have seen almost close to 900 kilometers of metro network is operational, and this has put these cities into a new kind of growth phase. So all these cities have become the kind of magnets for huge development going forward. But if the benefits of this accelerated urbanization and economic growth which it has ushered in, if they are to be distributed equitably, then the mobility systems will have to be gender responsive. And we know that women's participation rate in employment, in economic growth depends, or it depends purely on the access which they get to an efficient and safe transport system. So it is imperative to have this kind of system. Then only women's participation in the economic growth process will increase. Even the Sustainable Development Goals also envisage a kind of gender participation as well as enhancement in women's role. If you look at mature metro operations today, about 25 to 30% of the commuters are women. And compared to their conventional counterparts, the modern metro systems have shown sensitivity towards women's safety, convenience, and comfort. So we see a lot of such features in the modern metro system, even the regional transport system. We have 24/7 surveillance, CCTV cameras, special coaches for women, very well lit and well designed stations, then presence of women security personnel, even participation of women in the O&M phase, that is also significantly higher. A conscious attempt is being made to make train captains, the women as train captains. They are involved in the maintenance activities also. And this is really a better change, especially when you think of the conventional systems. But is it adequate when we talk about gender mainstreaming? Because safety aspect, some kind of convenience aspect is taken care of, but that is not the full elaboration of gender mainstreaming. So what exactly gender mainstreaming is? It is basically looking at things through gender lens, to gender perspective. So we have to first assess the needs and aspirations of that particular gender, take them into account while planning your project, designing your structure, even during construction. After that, budgeting, then monitoring, evaluation. So at every level of that process, this gender lens has to be there. But at the moment, that is not fully in place, and probably that is what we need to discuss. So we have reached a certain stage, but we have to go on further ahead. And as commuters, it is really needed that both genders get an equitable treatment as far as public commuting is concerned. But as commuters, their behavior is different, the choices are different, the travel patterns, why the choice of the mode of travel, then the concerns, aspirations, they are different. Metro system may be safer for women to travel, but if they are not having the last mile connectivity equally safe, then probably they would choose some other mode of transport where there is a safer in the start to finish connectivity. So these are the things which also need to be understood. Typically, the metro operators are pretty much data driven, because they need a lot of data, they collect a lot of data, they analyze it to ensure their efficient operations. But most of the times this data, rather conventionally, this data is gender blind. And generally it is used, the data is collected, but which is used for the convenience of operations point of view, or to increase their efficiency, increase their business. But the same data could be used to understand the women commuters requirements also. But that kind of thinking, that kind of sensitivity, I think it is still missing. And it is not a big deal. Most of the other ventures are doing it. E-commerce companies, then pharma companies, insurance companies, banks, they are doing it. They are recognizing women as their customers, as their consumers, and try to understand their needs, their requirements, and accordingly design their programs. Probably the transport utility will also have to do the same, because it's a win-win situation for both. Sometimes what women want, most of the times, not sometimes, most of the times, it is based on certain assumptions and certain stereotyping. It is basically because transport is still a man's world. Even in higher position, the decision making position in tech jobs, women are still missing. So inadvertently, the thinking is from the men's perspective. They assume that all commuters are able-bodied men, and accordingly the structures are designed, accordingly the schemes are planned, and then certain things are given, like the CCTV cameras are there, but they are not only for ensuring women's safety, therefore they are serving some other purposes also. But if women are, because we are almost have 50% women population, if we have to attract all of them to the transport system, then probably their specific needs, requirements are it is imperative that they are taken into account. Because when you think of safety of women on a transport system, we assume that certain number of CCTV cameras, some kind of an helpline, that would be good enough. But probably the kind of gender violence, the kind of victimization women suffer in transportation, it is nuancical, it will have different layers, it will have different angles. But unless that is captured, unless that is understood, it would be very difficult to achieve the actual gender mainstreaming in urban mobility. So it is in the interest of the commuters, it is in the interest of operating utilities that we have this data, So we need to keep, I personally feel that we need to have some structured program of collecting this data with certain intervals. There could be use of technology, using the video analytics in an effective way, but we need to collect this information. We need to understand the requirements, why women have certain travel pattern, what kind of needs they have, and then that needs to be built into our O&M system. And if that is done, if we bring women into this system and we improve their accessibility, then only probably their usage of public transport or transit will increase to the desired level, and that will lead to the improvement of their work participation rate, and ultimately the economy will be benefited, families will be benefited, because women have to play multiple roles, and if in all these roles they have to excel, then the very efficient and accessible transport is a necessity, and that could be easily achieved if we have some change in mindset, if these operating utilities have a different perspective. And that is why the women participation in metro operation also needs to increase. And that is the point which I wanted to make. I'm sure there are multiple speakers from diverse backgrounds, and each of them have worked with transit operators or other entities and understood the nuances of how to improve the participation of women, how to make these entities more gender sensitive, and their sharing of their views is definitely going to lay a kind of an action plan for us, or even for the government to come up with a policy, a specific policy in this regard. Individually, many corporations or municipal corporations are also working, and agencies like World Bank and others, they are helping them. But if it comes as a uniform or a hierarchical policy, then probably that is going to help, because lot of awareness generation will have to there, capacity building will have to be there. And today's this session will probably open up these new vistas of opportunity. So I look forward to a very lively discussion with all the panelists, and which will be followed by an equally interesting question and answer session. With this, I close my remarks, and I will request Laghu to set the context and take up the moderation. Thank you.
Working? Is it working? Yeah. Thank you very much for setting up the context. I think this round table in itself, mainstreaming gender on urban mobility itself, is a step towards what we desire to achieve. This is 16th UMI, and I think this is the second time only on this cross thematic area any round table or session is happening. So that in itself is an achievement, that it is being acknowledged at some level, at a national level, okay, why this particular topic is so important. So my congratulations to ministry and all the organizers, of course, who has been pushing this particular important issue at that level. Yes, we have reached at that level. I think a lot to achieve in this area. I myself is probably third and fourth time doing a gender and mobility session, and people always wonder why you are doing a gender session. So I try to justify my job, and I give a lot of credit to my previous organization. I was in GIZ, and I joined the GIZ with that kind of a legacy of implementing the long list which he was talking about, implementing the project in India, so many public transport, bus system, metro, and all these things. And there was one guy, Jaman, my supervisor, who was always pushing me, okay, Laghu, think about social aspect, think about gender, think about women and all these things. And I used to always wonder why this guy is pushing me so hard. Okay, I developed the project in this country, and I developed for everybody. I develop for men also, I develop for women also. So I have never differentiated. So he used to talk about the gender neutral, I used to talk about the gender blind. So that was the argument continue for almost 1 year. But that guy was so patient. I would like to take the Jorgen Baumann, my previous boss. I give entire credit to him. So after 1 year, he somehow managed to convince me. And then I start looking into all my work in 16, 17-year career, whatever I did, and start finding the loopholes. Okay, what's wrong I did in my projects. The entire perspective changed when I started looking my work, whatever the BRT, whatever the bus system, data, analytics, whatever I have done in my past. I I I found that what are the big things I missed. The entire perspective of the main, as ma'am said, how we see the transport system and how women see the transport system is entirely different. Okay, the lenses are different, the perspective is different, your behavior is different, I think, and our infrastructure should accordingly reciprocate to those requirements. She was talking about the data. Yes. So what is the data? Data is it a binary 0101, unless you give it some kind of a gender or some kind of a age, and then you develop your transport system according to that gender. But we need to give data first, that gender. Of course, lot many things can be worked out, and that's where that's where the story starts. And I started getting into this particular area, and yeah, even in this organization, there's a lot of focus where in World Bank, my colleague is there, Mitali. I support her in wherever my capability I can do. But this particular area is like I feel that it's a payback whatever I missed in 16, 17 year to my profession, to my country, and to my society. Okay, and I try to convince all professional seniors or whosoever in my profession, okay, this, please look at your project with this perspective. And the good part is now people have started recognizing. So we are taking baby steps, and I'm pretty sure where we will reach where all the developed countries, mostly the European countries, are doing. But yeah, that's a good step. So I'll try to do justice the job which has been given to me. So with this, we'll start the session. Yeah. So yeah, so we have a very diverse group today, and I'll start with Miss Krishna Desai's presentation. Krishna is a gender focal point in mobility practice in GIZ, and Krishna is a technical advisor since 2019, and she's currently working in Sustainable Urban Mobility Project in GIZ. As a part of this project, she has worked on gender reforms for transport sectors, identifying the issues and key reforms towards the developing gender-sensitive transportation system for the state of Kerala. She has also worked on the various projects such as route rationalization, city bus services in Trivandrum, hydrogen strategies. I know Krishna is one of those rare people in the country who has worked on the hydrogen strategies. Yeah, and making way for the buses and cycle for Kochi. So Krishna, yeah, let's hear.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Krishna Desai, technical advisor for GIZ. So coming to gender mainstreaming in urban mobility. So the question is, why is it necessary to actually mainstream gender? Yeah, so urban transport is considered to a male-dominated to be a male-dominated sector. Currently, only 3.5% of women workforce is working in the transport sector, because of which you can see that the infrastructure which is planned and designed, it generally lacks a gender perspective, and it does not include gender in a very convenient way. This is leading to transportation systems which are generally not safe for women and other genders. Many studies have been undertaken in different parts of the cities in India and outside of India, which have shown that women generally feel unsafe while traveling in public transport and in public spaces. This is mainly the reason. Because of this is generally women are not involved in the planning and designing of urban transport sector. This has a direct impact on the women's workforce. It leads to unsafe transportation system and restricts the mobility of women while accessing different opportunities, be it economic, be it medical, or be it social. A study by McKinsey has shown that a jump of 60% of GDP can be seen by 2025 in India itself if it can achieve gender equality. So when we look at the urban transport sector in India, we can see that a low female inclusion is seen at all levels. So we had done a brief assessment of the transit agencies in India, and we saw that very few transit agencies actually have female in the leadership position. So this was done a few time back, so it may have changed. But we could see that only 3 to 4 agencies of 30 assessed transit agencies had female at the leadership position. When we look at the female inclusion at the bus crew level, we can see that it ranges from almost 5% to 40%. So the inclusion of female workforce as crew has increased in the recent years due to some changes done in the regulatory requirements, but it is still low in many of the cities that is seen. And when we look at the bus drivers, it is almost negligible that we see women to be included as bus drivers in the urban transit agencies. Similar is the case in the maintenance of buses also. So what is the basic reason for the female employment to be so low in the transport sector? So we had done an assessment and we found that the working conditions, the inadequacies in terms of the facilities and amenities provided in the transport sector, the regulatory requirements which are there, they are quite stringent for women to enter the workforce themselves, and the stereotyping that transport is a male dominated sector, and there is no having no female role model for other female to actually enter the sector is a big reason for the lack of female employment in the transport sector. It is generally perceived that transport sector has one will need to work in the odd hours, one will have to travel in long distance travels. There are safety concerns, the training opportunities which are given in the transport sector to women are generally limited. Further, when we see the infrastructure amenities given to women, you'll see that the depots, the terminals, they generally do not have washrooms for women, because it is always assumed that women will not be entering the transport sector. So these are some of the basic reasons which, because of which you can see a limited inclusion of women in the transport sector as such. The impact of the limited inclusion of female in the transport sector can be seen in the design also. Here are a few photographs where you can see the high flow buses. It becomes difficult for women, especially in India, to get onto these buses, especially while wearing saris. If you look at these buses, which you can see, the windows which are there, they are opaque. It does not give a sense of safety to women while traveling into these bus. Similar is the case for first and last mile, where you can see the inadequate footpaths which are given, the lighting which is generally found to be low. It creates a sense of unsafe feeling for women while traveling in the first and last mile. Even when you look at the terminals, the washrooms which are there are generally not in a very good condition. This limits the access to women to travel safely and conveniently in a public transport system. When you look at the travel pattern of men and women, that also differs a lot. Men generally travel from home to work, and they have a general travel time, whereas when you look at women, they try to do trip chaining, including travels for social and care work. They generally travel with dependents, and their travel is generally not in a very specific period. We did an assessment of the census 2011 data also, and we found that women generally depend more on public transport and non-motorized transport facilities, whereas men generally travel more in private vehicles. Although the percentage of women traveling for work is much less than men, but then they depend highly on public transport and on non-motorized transport. Further, their travel distances are found to be much shorter than that of men. It is generally found to be less than 5 kilometers. So based on these issues that we had identified while doing an assessment of the issue of gender in transport, we had taken up few of the initiatives in GIZ towards mainstreaming gender. So one of the featured initiative is gendered inclusion in the first and last mile connectivity in capital region urban transport Bhubaneswar, where we had trained around 120 women and transgender. They were trained to drive the electric rickshaws, and they were included in the female workforce for the transport sector in Bhubaneswar. So training with regard to driving of electric autos, financial accountability, traffic rules, and gender sensitization were given to these identified beneficiaries so that they could take up their role successfully. We also did a cycle training for women in Kochi, where more than 700 low income women and girls were trained to ride a cycle. The objective of this initiative was to provide an independent mode of commute to these women so that their access area can increase to access different opportunities. We also did a survey of these women, and we found that 34% of the trained women had shifted to cycles for their commute. We also found that one out of four unemployed women had found a job after using cycle as their mode of commute, since their radius of access had increased. We also did a gender sensitization training at Capital Region Urban Transport. We sensitized the frontline staff of Capital Region Urban Transport and OSRTC with a special focus on gender. So around 1,200 officials were trained under this training. We also had done we also identified the reforms for gender in urban transport as part of our support to Kerala. So we had done a perception survey, and we had undertaken a focus group discussion with around 1,400 women in 3 cities of Kerala, based on which we had identified these reforms. So the first one is considering that there are so many institutions and agencies involved when we look at safety and security of women, and in the operations and maintenance of transport sector, it is necessary to actually have a nodal agency who can coordinate with all the agencies in place with regard to gender mainstreaming in urban transport. So a nodal agency can work towards this. It will be responsible for collection of different data related to gender in transport. We'll come to that later, of course, what sort of data can be collected by this nodal agency. It can be responsible for creating an annual gender statistics and a gender action plan, set targets for women employment. Currently, most of the agencies do not have targets for women employment in their agencies. Monitor and evaluate the data that is collected, and then actually plan infrastructure, systems, and services. The second is to enhance women employment, as we have already seen that transport is a male-dominated sector, and there is a need to include more women at different levels. So to review the existing workplace policies and come up with women-friendly workplace policy can have a huge impact on women inclusion in the transit agencies. Of course, there can be collaborations with self-help groups which can help them to bring on board women in their sector. Review the existing qualification criteria also. For example, when we look at the Motor Vehicles Act, you will see that the criteria for a bus driver in most of the states, it requires around 2 to 3 years of experience to get for them to get on to get a job as a bus driver. So there will be very few women who will actually have a heavy motor vehicle license, leave alone having 2 to 3 years of experience. So we need to review the qualifications criteria and then relax them also. There is also a need of targeted advertisement, train the women in the transport sector more, and also develop basic amenities. Of course, we talked about the infrastructure system also. There's a need to develop gender responsive infrastructure systems. The urban bus specifications to which the Mahua had released should be followed by the cities. Generally, women are women are as such face time crunch, and waiting for a bus at bus stop, it it is it is a time loss for them, plus it is sometimes also unsafe for them, especially while waiting at night. So having real time information of transit system, it's something very basic and which can be sometimes be very helpful for women to actually manage their time. The grievance redressal system which is there is generally considered to be very complicated, because of which generally women tend to restrict themselves to lodge and file complaints. If we can ease that, maybe that is something that can further the rate of complaints that are registered. There needs to be a street design guidelines, having proper lighting levels, having proper footpaths. While we have standards for all of these, but these are generally not followed in the cities. The bus stops and the terminals, of course, need to have adequate infrastructure system like CCTV cameras, helpline numbers, vendors which can support eyes on streets. When we come to data, gender disaggregated as
Krishna, last 2 minutes.
so we can collect gender disaggregated data through ticketing data. Segregated data analysis can be done in the comprehensive mobility plans, first and last mile connectivity. There should be a tab on the women employment. What is the current number? What is the target it should achieve? And the harassment reports need to be registered in a more detailed manner. In further to the disaggregated data, we had collected, so basically the ticketing system in Bhubaneswar was reprogrammed to collect so that the tickets can be categorized as men and women. Similarly, we had similar thing was carried out in Kerala State Road Transport Corporation as well. So these were some of the initiatives that we had undertaken in GIZ for gender mainstream. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Krishna. I think you covered, I think, all the building blocks which require, including the regulation, infrastructure, data, policies. Very comprehensively presented. On the data part, I'll come to chair later stage how this gender disaggregated data collection can be implemented in a metro system, especially when we have this closed loop card when there is no KYC. And if we are shifting to the open loop card where the KYC involved, and there could be other ways also for collecting data. I'll come back to you on this data. Probably this be replicated, gender disaggregated in the metro systems also. Yeah. Thank you. Next presenter we have Miss Mitali Nukor. Mitali Nukore is in Transport Global Practice of World Bank. She is an economist and focuses on devising solution on inclusive, sustainable urban mobility, regional connectivity, including logistics, multimodal transport in South Asia region. And Mitali is a author of Gender Toolkit also, which is, I think, displaying on the slide. And my colleague, Mitali. Yeah.
So I think, Laghu, since you started with your inspiration for why you got into this sector, I'll also start a little bit with that. Thank you so much. So this is helpful. So my inspiration was actually Mr. Gerald Olivier, who we know is speaking in the other auditorium currently. And then Mr. Olivier brought Laghu into our team. So it has really been a fantastic teamwork of these allies, Laghu and Gerald and myself, to really further this work in a lot of cities. Of course, we are working in Chennai. I will talk about that shortly. We are also working with MAM and NCRTC, and would love to work more in Delhi. But the genesis of this toolkit, which you see in front of you, it's basically 2 volumes. And it took me a year to write, and then I think about 6 months to get approved. more like the approval process was tougher because the World Bank, as you know, it takes time. But the idea was that a lot of cities now, like as Krishna very nicely explained, understand the challenge. Ma'am has also very nicely articulated the challenge. So we know the challenge, but if we know the challenge, then how do we go about it, right? We know that if we place a gender lens on the transport journey, it is a different experience for men and women to travel around a city. A woman with mobility of care and different kind of choices when it comes to employment and when it comes to labor force participation might undertake what Krishna exactly said as strip chaining, and might experience barriers along the different stages of a transport journey. Be it the first and last mile connectivity, actually undertaking that first and last mile connectivity, then of course waiting at the stops, as of course Krishna was mentioning, but then even inside the station, even to board and alight a bus, you can be groped on that process. And we have spoken to women and girls who have been groped while boarding and alighting. So in that situation, how do we solve for this? And there we started looking at, okay, we know that there are differences in the gender transport journey, but what are the levers? How can public transport authorities actually look at these differences, the genesis and the reasons for these differences, be it the cost, be it, safety considerations, and then design solutions that are responsive to the reasons why these differences are being observed? Because it's not enough to look at the stated preference or the revealed preference, but actually what is driving those preferences. And also, here I just want to mention one category of women that we often fail to address, which is the women who are not mobile. So we recently did this survey and with NCRTC in Delhi NCR, and we found that almost 10 to 15% of our sample was women who were not mobile. They are not moving at all, or they are moving within a radius of just about 5 to 7 kilometers on a daily basis. And typically, women are showing that their movement is about half of men in terms of the radius. So, in such a situation, how do you design? And that's where we came up with this programmatic approach to identify what works. Because it's important to create a sustainable program that's going to run for multiple years to see that delta effect that we are trying to achieve. And our program essentially is based on 4 pillars, this 4-pillar framework, where the first pillar is assessing the ground situation. And in assessing the ground situation, we can tailor the different building blocks that we talk about, that Krishna also talked about, to the local context. If I'm talking about Chennai or I'm talking about Delhi, they are two completely different stories. They are two completely different levels of safety perception and threat, and that may be founded or unfounded, but Delhi is currently at that very high level of threat perception, whereas Chennai isn't. So when we are going through different cities, we have to understand that safety perception and reality difference as well. There's definitely always the perception is much worse than the actual situation. But at the same time, we have to think about the differences in the mobility patterns. And by doing an assessment of the ground situation is where we really understand what that city needs. And then we recommend that you can look at the other 3 pillars, be it strengthening, planning, policies, institutions, bringing in more and more women into decision making, bringing in more and more women even into frontline roles. We recently interacted with the Delhi Transport Corporation, and they simply told us, we are not hiring any more male drivers. We have frozen hiring for male drivers. Now we are only hiring women drivers. And that's because even they have come to that realization that yes, we need to diversify our workforce. It may not always be possible to hire more, but it may be possible to diversify over a long term. And then, of course, there is about building capacity and raising awareness. I mean, how many of us, and I think we all can be very honest, how many of us would actually intervene in a situation on a public transport system or on the street if we saw harassment? Very few of us. And that is all of us in this room. So imagine what the situation would be like for an average person. Bystander intervention is hard, but can we get frontline workers and train duty bearers to at least diffuse situations in an informal way? Maybe that might work better. So we have to explore a lot of these solutions to see what can work and look at international best practices. And finally, on improving infrastructure and services. we often think about infrastructure design, and I think Krishna very nicely, talked us through some of those elements of infrastructure design. But we forget services. It's at what time do I prefer to travel? If I prefer to travel at 3 p.m., and at that time there aren't as many buses available, or the frequency of metro is low, then I'm going to call an Uber, or I'm going to call an Uber, Ola, or I'm not going to travel at all. So at that, even those basic availability of services to ensure that women's needs are taken care of, but at the same time having specialized services like a request bus stop system, which is what Toronto is doing and now even Hyderabad is doing, where we actually see that after 7 p.m., the bus is allowed to stop at places which are not bus stops. You can just stop closer to your home and reduce your first mile or last mile walking. And that makes it automatically safer for women. Of course, the operational elements of this have to be worked out, the proper routing has to be worked out. But as a concept, it is a low cost solution and yet increases safety immensely for women who can then avoid walking in poorly lit areas. So I think we have to think practically. And I've just come up with 2 or 3 examples of the work that the World Bank has been doing on this area. The first study I'd like to point out on assessing the ground situation is the work that we are doing to support the Rapid Rail RRTS in Delhi NCR, where we've just completed a primary survey to understand the perception of safety and also women's participation and also women's preferences of different modes. And we find quite clearly that, of course, the women who are commuting, again, not talking about the non-mobile, but the women who are commuting, many of them, much more of them actually prefer to take public transport. And they are an important traffic source for the RRTS, for the Delhi Metro, for the Delhi Transport Corporation. And yet there are so many other differences that emerge when it comes to their time poverty, the time constraints, in terms of the fact that they are more likely to always be accompanied by either a child or an elderly person. They are not traveling alone. And, this is how we have to design our systems to be more responsive. But the most important finding we had, and not just from the survey, but also from just speaking to women, is that I don't care if something is more expensive, slightly more expensive, within a range, but it has to be safer. And it has to be safer after 8 p.m. And these curfew timings in different cities, they keep coming up. I can't go out after 8 p.m. I can't go after 10 p.m. I can't go after 6 p.m. Every city is different. So I think this is where understanding that city becomes very important, and doing this kind of gender disaggregated data collection and analysis is very important. Now, here is an illustration of pillar 2 of our approach of strengthening planning and policies. And here we've talked about some policy incentives to enhance women's representation in the transport sector workforce, particularly to bring them as entrepreneurs. And one of the ways to do this is through preferential procurement. Kudumbashree in Kerala is a great example of how these self-help groups are coming and actually managing the metro stations almost completely. Some of them are retail outlets, and I think this is something that we would be recommending at NCRTC as well, where some of these stations, the shops, retail outlets can be given to local self-help groups to manage, and that automatically increases the presence of women at the stations, creates entrepreneurship opportunities, and also helps them just be safer, because you see more women in the system. And then we come to the third pillar, which is around building capacity and raising awareness. And we're doing this in Chennai, where in Chennai, we've helped to establish a Chennai lab, a Chennai Gender and Policy Lab. It's placed within the Greater Chennai Corporation, and it is housed with 3 experts on different areas of gender mainstreaming. And the idea is that nearly every single infrastructure project is being reviewed by them in order to look at the gender mainstreaming aspects. So this capacity building effort has served the Greater Chennai Corporation very well, and now the Gender Lab is working even with other transport authorities in the city, like the Metro Corporation and the Suburban Rail Corporation. And because of this dedicated team, we're able to expand the activities in Chennai quite considerably. But the most important thing is that we are also doing regular training sessions with staff in GCC, in MTC, in the different authorities to increase their sensitization to gender issues, which may not be natural. And finally, I think the most important thing when we are doing training is to work directly with the frontline staff. And in our upcoming project in Chennai, we are going to be increasing trainings for frontline staff and training women to take up frontline staff positions in the Chennai authorities. So that's on the third pillar. And finally, on the fourth pillar, I actually don't have an India example here. I am actually wanting to talk about Vienna here. And that's why I've sort of brought that picture of a step plan that Vienna has created for 2025. When I was writing the toolkit, I felt like quoting Vienna in pretty much every example and every recommendation as a best practice, because they're genuinely doing so much and they've done so much for 20 years. They've set up, an office for gender mainstreaming, and that also helps. But the most important thing is that, things like the Request Stop program, things like having, looking at the public transport journey in terms of its stages, and then seeing how do you make these infrastructure adjustments at each stage has what has really served Vienna so well. And now they're talking about, now they've reached a different level where they're saying, okay, now we're going to actually have affordable housing, which is gender sensitive, and then link it with 4 or 5 different types of transport modes so that you can cycle, you can walk, you can take a bus, all within a few meters of, this affordable housing solution. And even the parks and public spaces are reviewed from a gender lens to look at the usage by women and children, and not just domination by boys and young men or older men. And I think by creating these kind of forward-looking plans, Vienna has reached a point where it is really hailed as a truly gender-equal city, not only a gender-equal, city with a good public transport system. So, that's where we really want to be, I think. So with that, I'll conclude and just thank everyone for their time. And, here is a link to the toolkit. Even if you don't immediately read volume 2, which Laghu is also currently reading, and will finish by the end of this week, of course, tomorrow evening. It's a deadline. But even if you don't read volume 2, please read volume 1. That is meant for policymakers and decision makers. It has a lot of ideas from our side. At the bank, we're very open to having a partnerships approach to how we go to different cities and work with different cities. We're very happy to support any of the donor partners, any of the government authorities here, and work together with you to implement some of these solutions. So with that, thanks, Laghu.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mitali. I think for covering all these 4 pillars and what is to be done and how it is to be done. I think volume 1 and volume 2 talks about. I've covered 2 pillars so far. Yeah, it's I think 500-page toolkit, but yeah, I'm doing my best in reading that. Yeah. But yeah, I would suggest everybody, this is the most comprehensive work done in this particular area, and I think nothing left. But now the next thing is that it's up to us. How do we implement all those recommendations in our respective profession, whatever we are doing under the urban mobility? Yeah. With this, let's go to next presenter. Yeah. Miss Laura Ballesteros Machila, is it correct pronunciation? Yeah, Machila. Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, Machila. Okay, she's alternate senator, founding member of Mujeres and Movimiento Mexico. Sorry, yeah, it's a Latin. Yeah. So Laura is a public policy and regulation expert. As a local congresswoman in the local Congress of Mexico City, Laura led the enactment of mobility law along with civil society organizations, and the former head of government, Mughal Angel Mansera. As a sub-minister of planning in the secretariat, Laura Ballesteros introduced the road safety policy known as Vision Zero. She is also one of the founding member of Mozeres and Movimento Women in Motion. Yeah, thank you. Welcome. So we look forward to hear from you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me from here or this one? Okay. Can I have the? Perfect. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm so excited to be here with you, having this amazing conversation. What I have, what I am hearing here right now is that we have the knowledge, but now we have to implement it. Now we have to make it happen. And one of the biggest mantras that we have in Mexico when we are talking about sustainable mobility, but of course about gender perspective in mobility, is you have to put your money where your mouth is. If not, you're not going to have any kind of succeed, because it all will be stay in paper over the desks of the public policy and planning authorities, and things will remain the same over the streets. So we have to make it happen. We have to put money on that. And when we put money on that, that's when we are going to see if it's really a priority or not. Well, I am sorry because the presentation is in Spanish, but I will, of course, speak in English and translate all the things that are important. And I think that also we have very good images that transmit the message in the way that we want to. I'm going to talk about leadership in gender perspective when it comes about the transport and the urban agenda. And this is a very important thing to do, because I was talking about before this with a lot of colleagues, but also in other spaces and Congress like this. And one of the common things that cities that are facing transformative actions right now when it comes about mobility and gender perspective, the common thing that they all have is that they are having women leadership in front of all these changes. And it sounds like a commercial, but it is not. We have to look deeper where this is happening, and you're going to find women leading the way. And this is the reason why when we are talking about the working force in the transport agenda, we also have to consider the women who are part of the decision-making processes. So in Women in Motion, that it is a global network, we started in Latin America, and then we come into the United States and North America, and then to Europe. And now I have a very important announcement also to do for you. We are going to start our work here in India through the Women on the Move network, and also the Safety Pin leadership with Kalpana and all the amazing women that are working on that, of course, also Krishna, and a lot of women that we understand that we need to create this network together, and we are stronger together. So when we are talking about the gender challenges that we have in transport, this is one of the first images that it came in our heads, and it's not just in our heads, in the reality every single day. Public harassment, violence, and all the things that women have to live when we are trying to do our daily lives, just trying to go to work or to have our daily activities done. And we have a lot of images, I mean, and women who are part of these daily trips know what I am talking about. This is not funny, this is not nice, and this is happening every single day in every single bus or taxi or public transport system. In Mexico City, we started to work in not just how to improve the infrastructure and the public planning on this, also how to improve justice on this. This is a very important thing to work on it because most of the women prefer to stay quiet when they are being part of this violent situation because they don't believe in justice and the authorities. So we need to create a safer environment for them in order to speak out and to solve the problems and to be very active on the response that we are going to give for them when it comes about justice. So this is part of the numbers that we try to improve once women are creating this work with the justice. Of course, also public campaigns and signing is very important. In Mexico City, we create, at that time when I was authority on mobility in 2015, a very big public campaign with the UN, Women UN, and of course with the government and with the people who are the private sector who are investing money in the public transport systems, the drivers and of course the entrepreneurs, how we can create awareness on what women are living every day on the public transport systems and also in the public space. Is very important to keep in mind that when we are talking about mobility, we are not just talking about the public transport systems, it is also the public space. And when it comes about the gender perspective, it is more important. So this is one of the images that we create to try to create this awareness, and it was a very successful campaign. But at the end, it is not just about how we can create a better environment with infrastructure and on the public space. It's also about to understand how the youngest generations are living these problems and how we can and we have to support them to have a better future and a better present on their streets. And at the end of the day, the only thing that women want, it is not just a perfect boss. I mean, it is an important thing to do, but we need to understand that what we really want is that we need and we deserve to live in peace, without violence, and with a lot of opportunities on the streets. And if we want to talk about democracy, equality, and better opportunities, we need to understand that the street is one of the most important spaces to create this. And this is the reason why it is so important to work on this when it comes about future and when it comes about development. I'm going to be faster on this. It is important also to understand how women are creating their journeys in the daily journeys that they are having. And in Mexico City, we have this Origin Destiny survey we created in 2017. It is very important, and you mentioned it, how we can, and also Krishna, how we can create this data in order to understand better where are the journeys and how we can improve them. So in Mexico City and the metropolitan zone, we understand at that moment that we are having almost the same patterns of mobility as other Latin American cities. For example, in Santiago de Chile or Buenos Aires or Montevideo, in South America, most of the journeys of women are made by public transport systems. And in the world, I mean, in Mexico City, 65% of the journeys of the women are made by public transport systems. And another very important number and data here is that of the 100% of journeys in our city, that, as you may know, we are the 5th largest city, Mexico City, and the metropolitan zone of the world. We are managing at least 32 million of journeys per day. Over the 100% of journeys, 53% are made by women. So we are the majority of the journeys in the city. So I can't explain, because this is crazy, why, if we are the majority of the journeys, the majority of the budget, it is not putting on our journeys. I mean, this is crazy, and this is part of the patriarchy taking decisions. And because we are not included in all of decision-making processes, this is one of the biggest problems. And in the other side of the chart, you can see, and also Vitali was explaining this, how women have a different way to create our journeys every day, a different pattern. The pattern of the journeys of the men are linear, just for work and house, and well, maybe to go to the bar with friends or something like that. But in average, just a linear journey. And in women, we have a lot of movement over there because of the mobility of care. And the mobility of care, I mean, it is a way to understand how the journeys of the women happen. It is not a thing to be proud of. I mean, the mobility of care should not be only in the hands of women. It should be also in the hands of men. But right now, we are the ones who are charging with all the caring perspective and the caring work. So that is the reason why, in order to understand the mobility of women, we need to understand the mobility of care. So all these trips are short trips and around the house, and and they are like doing by walk or by public transport systems, with children, with elder people, to go to the hospital, to go to the clinic, to go to the school, to go to the grocery store. So this is why we are the first persons who are occupying the streets, because we are all day long doing journeys, doing all the work that we have to do. I'm just going to finish very soon with this. This is part of the data that I already shared to you. It is how the trips are split between men and women, and 53% of the journeys are made by women. 72.9 millions of women are doing trips daily in Mexico City and the metropolitan zone. 3 millions of the daily trips are made by public transport systems, and we are having 3 or 6 daily journeys per women all around our houses, just to complete one task. I mean, it is a very important thing to understand. 3 or 6 journeys per day just to complete one daily task. And women are more exposed because of this to the violence and security and the bad infrastructure that we have on the streets, because we are occupying them all day long. 3 important pillars to understand how to work with mobility with gender perspective. We need to understand the transport systems and the mobility. We need to understand the safety, and we need to understand the equity, with a lot of other tools around that. And finally, I want to share with you an initiative, a global one. I started my conversation talking about this. It is the Women in Motion initiative. It is a global network that it is integrated by a lot of people, women who are working in transport and the urban agenda in cities. We're trying to push the leadership, the female leadership inside the decision-making processes, and also the capacitation, the building capacities for all the women who are working in this government affairs, or maybe also private sector or civil society sector. We were created in 2018 in the ITF, in the International Transport Forum, with the support of the GIZ, with TUMI, of course, and Women Mobilize Women. We started to work this. We were a couple of women, but now we are more than 250 women working all over the world on this, having a lot of participation in the decision-making processes. We have a lot of strategic alliances here, because stronger together, and we need, of course, financial support to do this. We love to support the leadership of women all over the world, but we don't have to do this for free. We have to stop the women free job every time when we are trying to do also philanthropy or civil society work. Everybody starts to understand, well, yeah, but why you don't do this for free? Because women work also have to be paid. And we have all these strategic allies, as you may know. And well, we are a very big community with a lot of work over here. And our main tool to give the women the support that they need to improve their leadership inside cities is our international global leadership program, and we are preparing since 2019 moreover than 300 women all over the world with this. So I will, of course, answer questions later on, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. Very interesting to see how you talk about the budget link with the, demanding the budget linking with the data. I think a couple of states are also working in India on this gender-based budgeting, but probably on the sideline we would like to talk more about on this. Thank you. Let's move on to other panelists. And now we have Ms. Swati Khanna. Swati is an urban development professional with 17 plus years of working closely with local communities, government and private sector in India and globally. Swati has worked across cities on urban development, mobility and governance with keen interest in innovations, inclusive mobility and technology transition. She is now associated with the KfW. It's a bilateral bank, German Development Bank. And so Swati, we all know, my question would be, we would like to hear from you. We all know that, big infrastructure project in India or anywhere are, dependent on multilateral and bilateral agencies, okay, for the funding. A large amount of funding is dependency there. So how do you inbuilt, the gender aspect in the project where you or KfW is funding?
Thanks, Lagu, for the introduction and also mentioning about KfW. So KfW is just two lines. So KfW is the German Development Bank leading the financial cooperation under the Indo-German Development Cooperation in India and globally, but of course in India together with GIZ as the technical cooperation partner for under the development cooperation. And in the mobility space, currently we are engaged with different states and Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs on a couple of metro projects, including Nagpur, Surat, Ahmedabad, Mumbai, and a bus project in Tamil Nadu, which is the modernization of the bus sector in the state of multiple cities in Tamil Nadu, as well as the hopefully a little more popular, the Kochi Water Metro project, which has some electric ferries and quite some innovation in terms of technology, etc. But coming to your question, Lagu, the topic that you have touched in. So as KfW, I think, and also as a development bank, we come from with the perspective of making an impact. And to get an impact and a visible impact for that matter, and not just a very, English formulated impact, but impact in numbers, which is visible, which can be assessed, which can be looked back upon again to learn for the future is something that we emphasize quite a bit on. So whenever we get into a project or engage with a public project execution agency, we start with setting the goals, the targets, and the impact that can be achieved in terms of numbers, not just 4 bullet points for that matter. And this covers the project as a whole, which is like gender blind or gender inclusive, but also more and more on specific gender inclusion as well. And also the vulnerable communities in the society as well, like the elderly, disabled, and the likes. And this comes not only from the passenger perspective, just riding on the system like metros or buses, but other more comprehensive and more concrete design elements as well, like stations for the water metro, like the boat stations, or we focus a lot on first and last mile connectivity. So station accessibility around the metro stations, that is really critical. And there we have a very strong emphasis on transparent spaces for people. Once you have walls, once you have very closed elements and stations, that makes me as a woman, and I guess most of the women, feel unsafe. So inclusion and safety in the design elements is really critical. Ensuring an economic impact in the future on the population is very critical. This is something that we looked at in the water metro project. So in the water metro, Kochi water metro project, this is really critical in terms of women who have achieved access to livelihoods and business opportunities because of the water metro has been tremendous, despite just 2 or 3 routes being operational as of now and not the whole project. Apart from this, a lot of focus is also on the gender action plan, which is an integral part of the project. And the project execution agency, the state government, as well as the government of India, has to commit towards that gender action plan, which not only focuses on this impact, but also on the workforce inclusion as well. So every project has a target number of women inclusion in workforce, both at skilled level as well as unskilled level. For example, we were on a review mission very recently and in Surat and Ahmedabad, and it was very nice to see that both at the project execution level, project execution agency level, that is Gujarat Metro Rail, they have a workforce right from at planning and design stage to supervision of general consultant and also site supervision. They have a workforce of about 35%, which was substantial, and we were all pleased with the numbers. But also at the unskilled labor force as well. And when you look at the female workforce, it's not only about the inclusion, but also the equality and equity aspects of it in terms of compensation, payments, salaries, etc. So although we don't like push and emphasize or enforce that, but we do review that there's not much of a disparity between the compensation for the male workforce and the female workforce. Apart from that, especially for the unskilled workforce, it's really critical that women-friendly workspaces are available. For example, Ahmedabad Metro had a very elaborate system wherein at the labor camps or the workforce camps, they have built proper creches, they have built proper small schools wherein just 15 kids go of different ages, but they are taken care of. That helps the whole family to actually get integrated into the project implementation and construction phase. So it's not just the planning and design stage, which is very at the top level and where the skilled workforce, the engineers and the managerial positions are there, but also in the construction supervision and operations stage that it's really critical to bring in women. And then as Mitali also mentioned, the grievance redressal at all stages, right from planning and design to construction to operations, it's really critical that right at the beginning of the project, at the planning and design stage itself to some extent, but especially once the project gets an approval, the grievance redressal mechanism is in place. If a project is getting approved and it's about to be implemented, and I feel because the documents are public, right? And if I as a woman or somebody else as a woman, or I mean, being gender agnostic, even a male member, he should also be able to access the project execution agency to give some feedback, to give some ideas, or to express some concerns. So these are some of the aspects that we try to bring in, and this is not just at the approval stage or the project appraisal stage. There's a continuous review and monitoring that happens during the construction and implementation phase, but also post-implementation, it's really critical that the monitoring and evaluation of the data is undertaken.
Thank you so much, Swati. I think it's very important that, since the organization like KFW, World Bank, and other ADB, I'm sure other international organizations are funding the projects, all these aspects need to be pushed. Otherwise, to be very frank, it will not happen. It's unfortunate, to say this, but it will not happen unless we push us. I think this is the opportunity with these organizations to bring some different changes, which is otherwise not going to happen. So thank you for giving this perspective. I'm very much, keen to hear from Dr. Achal Jain, and the reason is, Dr. Achal, that you belong to a bus organization. I've been working in almost now 19 years in bus transport system. It's the rarest of the rare thing to see, being a woman in a bus transport, Dr. Achal Jain, CEO, PMI Electro Mobility Solution, one of the, I think, major electric bus OEM in the country. Achal is a dynamic visionary leader, currently serving as a CEO of PMI Electro, a renowned global technology company specialized in advanced electric bus manufacturing. Her relentless pursuit of knowledge and her desire to make a significant impact led her to pursue a PhD in economics, equipping her with a unique blend of skills in policy, macroeconomic analysis, and business acumen. So, Dr. Achal, as I said, the bus transport and movement, that's a very rare thing. And now, since OEMs with electric buses are also become the operators, okay, how are you using this opportunity being a leader in this organization? Because you are not only manufacturing, your guys are now also operating the buses to bring those changes, the changes which are, you understand what I'm talking about,
Yes.
yeah. So with no woman driving steering, holding the steering, with how many women we can bring into the system. So for whatever reason we could not do, but I think with electric buses, on a specification side, it goes in of the favor. And so what are you doing at your level to bring the changes?
So thank you, Lagu, and thank you, everyone. This is one of the most. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Raghu. I think I would start by congratulating all of us who are present here. Sometimes we don't celebrate ourselves enough as much as we should be celebrating. India is at the forefront of doing things for women. I have, lived across many countries, and having these discussions make me feel proud. Yes, we are not in an ideal situation where we should be, but where we are trying to at least go there and have discussions around it. So I'll start a bit about PMI Electro. PMI Electro Mobility is India's leading e-bus manufacturer. And our company, we focus on 3 pillars of sustainability. One is definitely getting us a greener, cleaner air to breathe in, which goes without saying since we are an electric bus company. There are 2 other pillars we strongly believe in. The second one is reducing the rural-urban divide. So our buses ply in 23 cities across the country, in which only 1 is a metro. The rest all are tier 2, tier 3 cities, which we are very proud of. The third main pillar of our company is actually to reduce gender divide. And when I talk about reducing gender divide, that happens at 2 places. One is at the production stage, and second is at the usage stage. So producing the e-bus, and then as Lagu said, we are now operating the e-buses, so at the usage stage of the e-bus as well. So I'll talk briefly first about the usage of e-buses. Now e-buses, as Krishna had highlighted, the problem with traditional buses, if you guys ever know, jo India mein purani bus hai, that was not designed on a bus, it was designed on a truck. Yeah. That's why it was so tall to reach. I remember when I used to go to school or had a heavy bag at the back, it used to be painful getting on the bus. All our e-buses are low floor buses. So at least that's one problem we feel we have tried to solve for. Second, the second version of buses that are going to come soon will have a ramp. So being a mother, I have taken my kid on a stroller multiple places. So that's another access that we would want to provide in terms of gender equality. The third aspect is, as I said, we have increased our buses in the tier 2, tier 3 cities where public transportation was lacking even more. The number of routes have increased in those cities, especially in the afternoon hours and so on, we see more women taking those buses. Our buses are equipped with definitely the CCTV and so on. We can track any bus at any point in time. So there have been times where we've seen we have a dedicated team that keeps monitoring our buses all across India. There are times when we've seen a bus being stalled and we've called up and said, ki kya hua? Kuch gadbad to nahi hui, and things like that. So our buses are fitted with very advanced tracking system as well. Then comes in terms of, one more aspect. Currently, I would be saying falsely ki we have women drivers. None of our buses are currently being driven by women. But what we've done is at least gender sensitization to our drivers and to the conductors and the staff that goes on the buses. We have trainings not only once but on a regular basis. Hamari employers keep the people who are driving the buses keep changing. So it shouldn't be the case you did one training and ho gaya. So there are trainings done in a regular manner. We will have about 1,500 buses plying in Delhi in the next 2 years, all e-buses, out of which 25% drivers will be women. There are going to be dedicated seats for women in those buses. I'm not going to take the credit for myself or my company in that regard. This is a great initiative that has been taken by the Delhi government to solve this problem by DTC and DIMS both. Then I want to go back to the production aspect of it. I think being a woman myself, मेरे को घर शाम को 6:30 बजे तक पहुंचना होता है. Because I have a 4-year-old, he will not go to bed if I'm not home. So one thing we had to try and understand is we not only want to create jobs for women, we want to be accommodating to them. आप ऐसे jobs बना दो which women are not able to do, that will not solve the problem. So, we have an all-women run battery plant where we manufacture EV batteries. So when we were designing that plant, we took some feedback. A lot of women were reluctant to come. We said, "Aap bana do, hum nahi aayenge." We said, "Why?" Said, "Aapke shop floor mein you have another 500 men. We don't want to come there." So this again, to solve this problem, we actually bought a new plot. We built a new plant which were all women run, so that these guys feel safe working in their environment. They have their own womanhood as jaise bro code chalta hai shop floor pe. So they can, it's their territory. They can do whatever they want and be proud of what they are doing. And I feel proud, hamare women battery plant ke baad, a lot of EV manufacturers have built all women battery plants. But as we were expanding, ek challenge aaya. My battery plant head comes, "Ma'am, thode men lane padenge." I said, "Nahi, hamara all women battery plant hai. Why will we bring men?" "Ma'am, late nights karni padengi. Fir kya karenge?" And I said, "No, our women can do it." She said, "Ma'am, आप भी तो रोज घर जाते हो, आपको अपने बेटे को सुलाना होता है. Then what will we do?" So then I said, yes, we have, I want to still feel proud of my all-women battery plant, but I don't want my women to get into a situation that can land them in trouble of multiple ways, either late night commute or घर में कुछ problem हो जाए or kids to suffer and so on. So one, learning out of that came is, yes, we want jobs for women, but we have to cater to their needs. We have to accommodate that. So even when we get our DTC women drivers, we have to get them in a situation कि they don't go on the unsafe routes रात को. Because जितना ही वो women passenger को आपको उसके बारे में सोचना है, आपको उस women driver के बारे में भी सोचना है. So then again the number, somebody asked me कि मैम आपके plant में आप बोलते हो women battery plant है, कितने, what % is it? It's a very small %, to be honest. But we feel proud कि हमने कुछ starting तो करी, इस बारे में कुछ सोचा भी. So that's why I'm saying कि we need to start celebrating the wins we are doing. Again, not getting complacent, but we have a long way to go. But at PMI, these are the small steps we've taken to solve for a very big problem that we are trying to solve for. But yeah, that's, but we, at least, I don't know this happened because I'm a woman, or I have 2 sisters and no brothers and so on. But hamari company ka ek principle hai, which is gender equality and reducing that gap that we have.
I think, thank you, Dr. Anchal. We were also working sometime on this particular issue. What are the constraints of bringing the women in bus transportation? So of course, there are many constraints, start from regulation, motor vehicle act and all those things. But what can be done at a local level without getting into regulation aspect and all these things? So this issue came from one of the guy who was preparing the schedule.
Yeah.
I nahi sakti. Look at the schedule. Which women work with this schedule in a country? The problem is not the schedule. Problem is the person who has been making the schedule, because there was never be a woman, and probably while preparing the schedule, no consideration was given. Just that it's not something cannot be done. It can very well be done, and we attempted it doing it, but it was never be thought of. So these are small steps. So all I'm trying to say is that you don't need big steps to bring this kind of change. Very, very small step you can take, and big changes will come. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Hanchal. Yeah. So let's go to Chris. So the only male panelist we have. Good to see you. Yeah. So Chris is marketing and communication manager at the Dutch Cycling Embassy. Good. A public-private partnership that represents the best knowledge, experience, and experts from the Netherlands. As a long-time campaigner in Vancouver, he fell in love with Dutch bike culture in 2016. Of course, all of us know about it. And inspiring him to co-author a book, Building the Cycling City, the Dutch Blueprint of Urban Vitality. Thank you so much for joining us, Krish. Chris, all of us know, the Dutch countries and the cycling culture. I saw one of the slides. She was talking about the cycling training program in Kochi. It looks a very simple thing. Why to train women for cycling? It looks like, okay, you are not training for the bike or you are not training for the buses. But where do you think how the women empowerment and all these things are linked with such a simple thing called cycling? What? Yeah.
Thanks, Laghu, and good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. It is a fantastic question, and I'll begin by acknowledging my privilege and my bias as the other man on the panel. I myself went through, I guess, a form of awakening, light bulb moment through my wife, Melissa, who co-authored these two books with myself, and steadily fed me a diet of feminist literature that eventually radicalized me to the importance of this topic and the co-authoring of a chapter on feminism and urban planning. The Netherlands, it's a country where there's very high female participation in cycling, in mobility in general, but I would argue in larger participation in society because of that. And a lot of the simple answers we receive when we talk about that is that it comes down to road safety. It comes down to the construction of safe, separated cycle lanes, but it's really so much bigger than that and more complex than that. And we have to, I think one of the big lessons about the Dutch experience, and it was almost by accident, it certainly wasn't part of a gender mainstreaming policy that they implemented, but they made a strategic shift in the 70s and 80s to move from focusing on individual cycle lanes to more of a network-based approach, from this linear, male-dominated commute travel pattern to the more spider web, shorter multi-purpose journeys within cities that are still disproportionately taken by women, by children, by the elderly. And so through this combination of traffic calming within neighborhoods, segregated cycle paths on the individual or the busier thoroughfares, they've been able to increase not just the number of people cycling, but the diversity of people cycling. And of course, that comes with softer measures like teaching those groups how to use the infrastructure. But it's really this network-based approach that's been the game changer. Talking to people about where they're cycling, but maybe more importantly, where they currently aren't cycling, making it possible not just to get from your house to the office, but to get to shops, restaurants, friends' houses, schools, public transportation facilities, and everywhere in between. And so with this now network-based approach, we're able to, show this blueprint to cities around the world who can hopefully forego a similar shift from talking about individual cycle lanes to this network which connects, not just cycling to the destinations within the city, but to the public transportation system. And I think that's been my big takeaway of my short time here in India, is the lack of connectivity between the metro specifically and people on foot and people on bikes. And the tremendous bike parking that you see at the Netherlands train stations is indicative of how the infrastructure networks feed into the public transportation system. And then a shared or rental bike on the other end of the journey that allows that seamlessness, but that's trip chaining so that somebody could drop their children off to school on the bicycle get to the train station, hop on a train to a nearby city, and then can continue on with their journey. And so, yeah, that multimodal system, the network-based approach, the enabling of childhood independent mobility. And I think this is another topic that we don't talk about nearly enough, is when you provide the infrastructure networks for children to cycle, suddenly the caregiver is freed up with all this additional time, that additional journeys that they don't need to make to get the kids to school or to after-school sports or other activities. So in a lot of ways, yeah, the cycling infrastructure, the cycling culture that requires hard infrastructure but softer measures like lessons, encouragement, they work together in synergy to create a much greater inclusion in the transportation system. But as I said, it's not necessarily a direct policy that resulted in that, but it's more an indirect outcome. But hopefully we can take a lot of lessons and learnings from that experience.
Thank you so much, Chris. I think it's a very different perspective to, in a planning process, getting into those nuances, which sometimes we missed here. It's great to learn. I think we have Krishna reached 4 o'clock. Yeah, almost time. Yeah. So I'll come back to the chair now, and ma'am, I would like to close the session. And please, couple of questions I'm posing to you when you close. I think we heard about 3 presentations, and one of the common point I could listen is the women leadership. So, which is, of course, to some extent we are seeing in the metro system. Bus system is still very there. Okay. But I would like to know, how do you think why it is important when some decision comes to you? How the decision making change being a woman and otherwise, please try to highlight on this. And second thing is that we talk about this gender disaggregation. I think the Bhubaneswar started with this gender disaggregation data, and they also developed some dashboard. Okay, so in bus system it's easier to collect because there is a conductor involved. It just issue a code 01, a man and a woman, and there is a time stamping and there is a location stamping, and you can actually see, if you select the night 10 p.m. to 11 p.m., you can see how women are traveling across the city, and accordingly you can do more localized safety treatment rather doing a generalized safety treatment across the city. How it can be implemented in metro system, because we all know they are much advanced than the bus system. If you can close covering this question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What an enriching session this was, and I think, and I'm sure that everyone in this room is now more informed, more sensitized about the issues around gender mainstream. And I congratulate to all the participants. Everybody brought a different perspective to the table, and we had such detailed discussion, and still we could finish on time. That is probably because there are more number of women on the panel, and we know how to manage our time. So just to answer the questions which Raghu has asked. First about metro. Yes, metros they are a very advanced system. And when we talk about the inclusive, gender inclusive transport, we always think about bus system or the pedestrian system, the cycling, because these are the systems, the conventional systems. We think that they are still not gender responsive, and a special attempt will have to be done. While in metro system, because it's a modern system, it already has a lot of features, so we feel that that is more gender sensitive. But as I mentioned, as everybody has mentioned, a lot needs to be done. And if we are using technology to the extent which metros are using, then they must go one step ahead and use that technology for understanding the gender specific needs. Just to give you an example, when I was told that I have to chair this session, before that, I think I was one of the participants, and the questions which were addressed to me were about the women participation in Mumbai Metro. So we have 3 corridors running. They are not run by MMRC. One is by Reliance, the PPP Metro. The other 2 are MMRDA. So I just tried to get information from these 3 metros through my team, that exactly how many women passengers are there. And nobody could give me an answer. It was just approximate numbers. And when I asked my officers, they are otherwise very, very sensitive, but on these issues, they were not. They said, why, what kind of question is this? We have data, but we don't have gender specific data. Then I tried to get information from Delhi Metro also. And they're also only approximate numbers. There is no information. And I really kept me wondering, because I was assuming that this information would be available, the kind of technology we are using. But our ticketing system probably will have to be modified. And as you say, when the open access cards come, so they will have to be pushed. But there would be other technologies. Like I personally feel the video analytics could help us. Because very recently, I also work in Mumbai Municipal Corporation, and my IT team, I'm in charge of IT there. And there on Ganpati Day, the Ganesh Visarjan, which is a very big festival in Mumbai. And the last day of Visarjan, there is the Ganesh idols are immersed in the sea. And there are huge processions where it is one of the extremely crowded kind of event. And on Girgaon Chowpatty, which is a famous place for Ganpati immersion, so a lot of CCTV cameras, big arrangement is done there. And then my team ran with the help of some our consultants, they ran a video analytics software on that. And then they could get a data of how many people actually, because there were all earlier used to be very approximate numbers, but we could get a data on exactly how many people visited, what was the number of women, how many children were there. Because this video analytics, you can do all these things. You can give all those parameters and you can find it out. The same thing I'm doing, because Mumbai Corporation runs a zoo in the middle of the city and the space is limited, and sometimes there are very crowded days and it becomes difficult to manage the crowd. So there also we are trying to do it. And it is easy with that kind of technology to find out the gender, because you have face recognition, so many other things. So you just have to run some software behind that video capture and you can find out this. So we may have to know, I have told my team, if you don't have any other measures, then we have to use these kinds of technique. But probably as metro corporations, sometimes you become complacent that we have everything, but we need to find out, and we have to find out ways of, because so many issues are thrown out in this one session itself, that and there are so many nuanceical things which are associated with the safety of women and the gender related violence, which normally we don't understand. We assume that everything is fine. I'm really happy to know what Chennai is doing, what NCRTC is doing, and probably all metro corporations will have to take step towards that. And there was another question about women leadership. Yes, certain sectors, the leadership is not able to come naturally. So probably there we'll have to induce, we'll have to trigger that, we'll have to create enabling kind of mechanism. For example, the project which we are doing, that's an underground metro. So during construction phase, despite our efforts, we couldn't get many women. But maybe in certain, like the design part of it, all contractors did a design built contract, and all their architect or designer teams, I could see many women in that, because probably that is where it's a tech job, but still the work environment is, the timings are suitable. But in metro operation, yes, there is an ample opportunity, and if need be, we need to reserve even the places for women there, because there is ample opportunity. And more women in metro operation, I think safer and more inclusive it is for the women passengers. And as far as women leaders, when it is how the decision making happens, then I think as women, you always tend to be more equitable. You always tend to be inclusive. We probably become very fair in your judgment, because we have gone through that process, and we want us to be treated like that. And that is why when every decision, at least as managing director of the company, I always look at these kind of aspects of that decision making, and irrespective of gender, of course. But these principles need to be followed: the principle of natural justice, the principle of equitability, the principle of inclusivity. And I think that is what makes a difference probably in any organization when women are in leadership position. Thank you so much. It was very, very impressive the way all of you, Laura, even Anchal, this was a completely different perspective. What you guys are doing is also very impressive. And I think this kind of bonding and the common thought which we have discussed today. I think everybody should take it forward and let us make our mobility more inclusive, more gender responsive and gender sensitive. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So we have time. Yeah, let's take 5 minutes or let's say two, 3 questions at max. Yeah, ma'am, please.
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me? More a quick comment than a question. Thank you so much. It's been really wonderful to hear all of you. I'm Vinita Srivastav. I'm also from the team of NCRTC. I've spent 25 years in Indian Railways. I have driven a two-wheeler. I've been CMD of Scooter India, which made three-wheelers. I have driven a 2600 horsepower 16-wheeler locomotive and forklift trucks and cranes. However, still when I leave home, I have to answer 3 questions. And this is probably the summary of your 200-page toolkit. Kahan ja rahi ho? Where are you going? Kab tak aogi? When are you going to come back? Late to nahi hoga. Der to nahi hoga. And a 4th question is, कि गाड़ी खाली है बीच में क्या मतलब while you're at office is your vehicle available for use. And the 5th question sometimes is khana. That's a 1-word question, like who's going to make the food or who's going to plan and serve the food. So yeah, I guess all women have to slowly evolve from it. In the Indian context, it's probably more useful to have metros, stations, or food courts in malls where even the family is, one of the days of the week coming out of their homes, waiting for the women of the household to arrive, and then maybe make the last mile together. That's one thing we miss sometimes. Patriarchal society. Let's leave all those aside, but celebrating festivals, women traveling in groups, a natural, expected, like we are building a corridor to Meerut. So it's an area where possibly women are that 5-kilometer radius. So what do they travel for? What are the approved societal excursions permitted for women? Maybe those, if you address, it might be a more useful outcome. Right? But thank you. Lovely discussion today. Thanks.
I would now request the chairperson to distribute mementos to our moderator, Dr. Raghu Parashar, and other speakers. El momento, Honduras el momento, Mexico. Ms. Krishna Desai, Gender Focal Point Mobility Practice, GSA. Swati Khanna, Senior Sector Specialist, Urban Development and Mobility, KFW Development Bank. Chris Brookley, Communication Manager, Dutch Cycling Embassy. Dr. Anchal Jain, CEO, PMI Electromobility Solutions. Vitali, Consultant, World Bank. I would now request Mr. Raghu Parashar to present a memento to Chairperson Ms. Ashwini Videk, AIS, Managing Director, Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation. We thank you for joining us and for your cooperation. Please join us for tea. All the speakers and panelists, please give a photograph.